the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded on audio and video. I'll wait for a moment for Councilor Schwartz to return, and then we'll look at the approval of the minutes for October 1st. I have a question. It's now on minutes and voting. Since I will be abstaining, then abstention is considered a vote, correct?
Yep.
Okay. To make sure.
Well, are you,
I was not here.
right, oh, right, I'm sorry. I
So
was
the
the
chairman
chair.
abstained.
If the vote is 2 to 0 to 1, I think it'll still carry. It's the majority of members present.
There were only 3 voting members here.
Right, but it should. I have a question on.
So I would entertain a motion for the approval of minutes for October 1st.
Move approval.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I actually have a question. So these are just the minutes from the EDBU meeting. These are not the minutes from the ad hoc committee, which is separate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify. We had the ad hoc meeting after this one.
Yes.
Oh, I forgot. Sorry. I think this is a fair representation of
Any other discussion on the minutes from October 1st? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I will abstain. I was not here for the meeting, so it's. Is anybody from the public, and the way we run this meeting, councilors, you can also speak during the actual, the item that's coming forward, so that may be what you'd like to do. So seeing no public comment, we'll move to the one and only item on the agenda, which is the stormwater and flood control utility ordinance, adding that.
Move recommendation.
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Would it be okay if we,
Yeah, I think that's.
Councilor Adams? You're also welcome to come sit with us or stand there, whatever you're most comfortable.
I was going to listen to the discussion because ordinance is taking up Monday. So if there are concerns or any issues raised here, I just want to be aware of them.
Okay.
So that ordinance can take them up.
Let me just say, I spoke to Councilor Murphy, the chair of ordinance, and I don't believe they're going to take it up on Monday. Is that?
Well, not as a public hearing.
Not as a public hearing.
Right.
Okay, but it's still on the agenda
You
to
have to
discuss.
still wait for a youth commission.
Oh, okay.
It's still on the agenda, is that correct? But not as a public session.
Right.
Okay.
But since you're here, and one item that I don't believe is listed, which is your amendment, and we can either discuss that now, and then you might want to stay or not. Would you like to talk about that
Sure.
now and what that amendment is going to be that you're proposing that will be an addition here? Do you think that sounds wise, or would you rather have the discussion first and then add that on to it?
Well, let's.
You can go ahead if you want. You can go ahead and have the discussion first.
I'm sorry, I lined it up for ordinance, but I didn't bring it for tonight. The
Oh,
amendments.
That's okay.
I can just make a reference to what they are.
Yes.
That's fine. I never asked you to do that. So.
Yeah, it won't be,
Well, let's have a general discussion.
okay. So we'll have a general discussion about this first, and then talk about the amendment that may be coming forward. Would you like to start us off?
I know you, Council, the chair, you were more involved in this certainly throughout the entire process than I was, and I trust that most of the legal elements in the very beginning are accurate. I'm curious about how I was surprised to see that the rate model. This is section 286.
Yep.
C.
286C or 286-6?
No, 280-6.
Yep.
C. Is there a 286?
Okay, that number is.
Oh, no,
the rate model.
280-6C is going to be part of the ordinance. I was surprised by that. And then and not going to be set according to the Board of Public Works or whatever. I'm not upset with it. I think actually it's a decent, it's a very, I was advocating for a higher runoff coefficient than was previously proposed. I'm also worried about H on the same section, 286H. I'll just read it. Any impervious area within the federal, state, county, or city-owned right-of-way used by the traveling public will not be attributed to the parcel. So this is why I was curious why I was concerned that no one from the Board of Public Works, the Department of Public Works, or from the administration was here, but because I don't really, I'm not sure if we're getting at the right thing here. I think we might be, but maybe we're not. I mean, here's the idea, and I leave this as a question. I'll leave my comments open after that. Basically, what we want to do is, if you have a layout, public layout, let's say it's 40 feet, but the road and the sidewalk is only 30 feet, right? So there's maybe 5 feet on either side of the sidewalk that most people consider part of their property, but it's truly not. It's part of the city layout.
Right.
We would like, it makes sense that 5 feet is billed to the property owner.
Are you talking about the 5 feet that are legally owned by the city or the state?
Yeah, but legally owned by the city, but no one walks on it. It's people's, usually it's the grass or a hedge area or something that's right next to there. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
I think would it be possible, and there's a great question for ordinance, and I'll certainly bring it up with DPW, because I think there may be a question about whether we legally can do that. We might be challenged on that. For example, any trees in that area are city trees. We don't even allow people, even if they consider it their property, and we've run into this on Washington Street. People called up and they lost elm, and they said, we want to put up our own tree here. And the city said, can't do it.
It's in the layout.
So you're telling somebody you can't use this to put up trees, but we're going to actually include this in your area considered your property. And even though, and it might even work if everything was conformed and was the exact same size, but you actually have different areas and different sizes. I think we'd run it, but we can certainly raise it as a legal question, whether that's even an option.
Well, so that's what I'm trying to get at. So if the layout, it says any impervious areas within the federal, state right of way used by the traveling public. So to me, that sounds as though there's the city right of way, and then there's that which is actually used by the traveling public. So to put the two together might only be indicating roads and sidewalks, and maybe the utility belt, but it may not be the entire layout.
So why don't we?
That is the city's.
I'll make sure we address that.
I think
I don't have an answer for
right.
you.
No, and I don't either. And I was hoping maybe we would have someone from the administration.
Right, and maybe Councilor Adams, you can also bring this to ordinance, but it'll be a question I'll
Okay.
Okay.
So I have other things, but
Sure.
I want to leave it open.
Anything on that particular issue or other things? Otherwise, why don't you want to keep going on your questions, and then we'll open it to others.
Yeah, sure.
We'll go through them.
Another one that I know this is this has been discussed, but I think is an interesting topic, is 280/9B2, which is this third to last page at the top there, B2.
Yep.
Public, there are exemptions for public or private land with a permanent agriculture preservation restriction or conservation restriction.
Yep.
Held by the city or state or other permanently protected undeveloped land as documented. To me, this seems, it seems tricky to enshrine this. It's the only other, in law, I could see the Board of Public Works possibly working on credits for these kinds of properties, but to put it into law when it's very possible that there is land that's subject to conservation restriction might indeed benefit from significantly from stormwater, from the stormwater utility. To say that it's exempt is surprising to me.
Any comments on that? Council?
One of our concerns on the Conservation Commission was that the stormwater ordinance not install any disincentive to, in the future, allocating additional lands for conservation restriction. In most cases, the conservation restriction would so limit any creation of any human-built device or area that runoff, it's going to almost all be permeable land. Agricultural, I hadn't thought through as well. An agricultural restriction might allow significant barns and other impervious surface that, in fact, you may argue that there will be stormwater implications from that impervious surface, and therefore there should be some fee. But on the conservation side, we're pretty pleased with that exemption.
Can I just, I agree that the thing that I'm more worried about is APR over CR, but I'm also curious, I mean, you know, remember, I don't know if you remember that land up in Whately that the city purchased, that the counselor, a few counselors here swore that it could not be built on, you know, it was too craggy, you know, it was too, the city bought it to protect our water rights. But anyway, there is land, especially land in the western part of the city that is, has a lot of rock in it, and you can imagine water cascading off of it, even though it's in its natural state. It's rocky, craggy, it's part of a foothill or a hill that basically has the water running downhill on it. And you could put a conservation restriction on it, but it would still be displacing probably a lot of stormwater.
Most naturally occurring terrain like that has already established some kind of runoff. There's a stream, either perennial or vernal, that is the result of, that's been going on for millennia, and something's gotten carved. There's a swale or some way in which the water is carried away. Once you get into, we can manage those with our stormwater runoff facility fees, then you start getting into a whole other area of, are we going to manage naturally occurring stormwater?
This was certainly an issue that was discussed, the Stormwater Task Force discussed this, and I think the same issues that Kevin brings up. There didn't want to be a discouragement on these restrictions. I understand your point as well. And just to frame this generally is, out of this, I'm not sure we need to necessarily tonight come up with recommendations or not, because it may come back. These are great questions that can then come forward in the public meetings that you're even having and see what did the public say, because one of the meetings that we did have, can't remember whether it was the last one, there've been so many now, where we discussed this whole thing, and a number of people with agricultural land came up, and I think that was some of the concern. I think it's very different to say, okay, you can apply for a credit, and it has a different tone and texture to say, you own 80 acres, 100 acres, yeah, we talk about credits for you as opposed to an exemption. I understand your concern that if you do the exemption, then are you exempting some land, if I get you right, that you shouldn't be exempting on this. And I think that was a balancing act, but overall, I think this was, I don't think it was very controversial on the Stormwater Task Force. I'll tell you, if you listen to some of their dialogue, they would beat things around for days, it seemed. And this one, people were pretty much in agreement out of both the task force and on the DPW. But I think it's an interesting, it can certainly come back as a question again.
Even with the agricultural, I mean, we have the impervious area, good, just to double back to 86C again.
Yeah.
86C. The maximum buildable pervious area for any one property, that's for pervious surface, shall be 1 acre. This is the enshrining, this is the legal
Right.
language that would limit an 80-acre farm,
Yeah, that went in there. Yeah,
barns
that was
or whatever,
yes.
to 1 acre. Look, I value farmers, I value farm products almost on a daily basis, but
Let me just make sure I have your concern correctly. Your concern is there would be some land exempted that shouldn't be exempted.
yes, 79 acres of 79 acres of land would be exempted by this, by 86C, and then if you APR it, then all the land would be.
Yeah.
So I actually everything else, it seems to me as though the credits are approved at the final analysis by the Board of Public Works.
Yes.
28010A. So those won't be law, those will be policy.
And your suggestion would be move these to the
Yep.
policy place from
Yes,
the
that's
legal
right.
place.
That's
I think
right.
that's a legitimate thing. We're still talking about this in our joint committee. This is not moving quick. We're not moving this quickly, by the way. I just want to say that. There have been some folks saying we're trying to get this through by January 1st. Might have even been one of those folks saying that 6 weeks ago. There's no way we're going to do that. We're taking all the time we need to make sure every one of these questions is answered.
So you're thinking
It's not-
spring sometime?
I'm thinking probably spring, but if there were some new developments coming forward, just today, we know all of the times that the various wards have scheduled their meetings. We now know where the business community, the chamber is scheduling their own meeting. The DPW is going to have another public meeting, I believe. Ordinance committee is changing. They were going to have a public meeting at their next session, but they're going to wait until all the others. We're going to wait until all of these meetings are completed. My guess would be that's going to take us just till January. Then we have the ordinance moving forward. We may not even go to ordinance committee until January. So I will certainly,
Well, I'll be off the council by then, so.
you may, but I think we'll make sure we address these. Yeah.
And also, you often don't have any meetings in January because we have to set up new committees.
But we have that first one, and I think we don't meet again until February.
You mean council?
Yeah,
No, we would have
Oh,
a
but-
council, but.
but not, yeah, that's
to
right.
set
Not
up
committee meetings.
Right,
They
so
usually don't set up till February.
to have it in place by the spring rains. Other comments? Counselor Adams? Sure, come on.
I have a few amendments I'll be presenting. to the ordinance committee on Monday. Well, the first one has to do with definitions and direct costs versus indirect costs. 280-4. I'm sorry, I don't have a printout of this. I decided to,
Oh, you
I
don't?
have the ordinance, I don't have the amendments printed up.
But you can give us the,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
so
a little
it's-
bit, sure.
yeah.
I just realized the last one, this was happening.
280-4, okay.
Right, that was gonna come. The First Amendment basically is an attempt to define the direct costs and the indirect costs of the utility fee. And the purpose is to ensure that the fee is only used what it's supposed to be used for, and that in the future down the line, it won't be used to supplement the general fund. So, I actually didn't draft this one, Ed Etheridge did, but what I'm presenting it, what it states is that the direct costs shall mean the costs incurred in the operation and maintenance of the stormwater and flood control fee, and the indirect costs shall mean employee benefits, insurance, and costs paid by the city of Northampton separately that are allocable to the direct cost of the stormwater and flood control fee. So, essentially what it means is that the direct costs are defined, but also indirect costs. For example, if the fund needs staff, employee benefits can be paid for through the fund as well, even though that'll be seen on the general fund side, as opposed to the DPW budget itself. So that's the purpose of that.
And the rationale, and I understand it, but if you could explain to the full committee why you would have that amendment in there.
Well, again, it's to ensure that this at some other point in the future doesn't become something that is used to supplement the general fund, and that's limited and articulated specifically what the direct costs are and what the indirect costs are that it can be used for.
Can I just add, so
And nothing else.
what we've heard from a number of people in meetings coming to us is a lack of trust that, what's going to happen here? They're going to just bill us for this, and they'll use it for something else, and we don't really need it. Do we really need all this money? And I think what this is saying is this will only be used specifically like other utilities that we have. This will be used for this utility and for this utility only. There may be indirect costs around that.
That's actually, I just have a question. It seems to be that this amendment defines it in a way that allows the fund to use to pay for indirect costs. So
if it's indirect costs that are, but it has to be, those indirect costs are specific to. So in other words, you may have a staff member who works half-time on on a piece of equipment. That half-time is a full-time employee, but half of his salary, and we do that in a number of
that's
other
similar to
places.
the other utilities.
It is similar to others, but I think the concern was that we were going to go beyond that. That unless it's very specifically stated, that we might raise, because people say you're going to raise a lot of money here, and then we're running short on teachers for JFK, and you say, well, we won't do repairs on stormwater. We're going to, because we don't want to lose the math teacher. That we want to make it very clear. I think that's certainly the intention, but I think that's the point of the amendment. We want to make it very clear that this is operating, these costs are going directly to this new utility.
I'm certainly not against that. I believe we're constrained by state law not to exceed any utility fees collected by, so I'm not sure what we're really doing is just clarifying.
Yeah.
It's really mostly clarification.
Yes, we're doing a little overkill.
Underscoring.
Yes, we're putting it in bold.
Okay.
Right. If it's articulated as clearly as possible, the indirect cost language actually needs a limitation. Because it states exactly what the indirect costs are.
What are they?
Indirect costs shall mean employee benefits, insurance, and costs paid by the city of Northampton separately that are allocable to the direct cost of the stormwater and flood control utility.
So it doesn't include salaries of people who are allocable to the stormwater
Those are
utility?
direct costs.
No. So what would be an example of a cost that would not be an indirect cost that is allocable to the utility?
That would not be an indirect cost?
And that would be a direct cost. What would be an example of a third cost that we would be unable to charge a fee for?
that would be unable to charge a fee.
Oh, yeah, that you couldn't collect, that you couldn't reimburse from the fund, that the city would have to pay for. I
The
can't think
city,
of,
the city couldn't hire someone in the assessor's office to help with this fee. You can't add additional staff in the assessor's office for this fee,
and that's because it's an indirect cost.
because that's your adding a position. That would that's how you indirectly supplement the general fund. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Oh. The direct costs then are, that's not a direct cost?
No, it's not direct cost.
So what we're saying is, no administration of this system is permitted if administration results in more people.
No, not necessarily. It's not more restrictive. If someone's hired in the DPW specifically to deal with this, and nothing but the administration of this, that's permissible.
Also, the
If the
hired
assessor hires
DPW
someone-
liaison to work in the assessor's
No.
office.
If they're spending some of their time doing general fund, if that person in the assessor's office is spending some of their time doing things that are not part of this, of administering this utility fee, that's the concern. That's backdoor supplementation of the general fund.
Okay,
That's
so
the
then
concern.
I'm not in favor of it.
Why is it why?
For the exact reason you just gave. That you'd be unable to administer the collection of fees or the assessment of exemptions or whatever from any other part of the city, because that would essentially be the general fund supplementing the utility, which I'm not in favor of.
You would need that person to be hired to exclusively deal with this, implementing this utility fee, and they can be paid as a direct cost of this utility fee.
Would it be exclusively, or could it be a portion?
Well,
Could you have somebody who's a quarter of their time is allocated to this, 3/4 to something else?
In the assessor's office.
my understanding is well, I don't know. Actually, I really don't know.
We have that now, and there are jobs that are broken down, I believe, at least in the past, I remember this, there are jobs that are broken down, and part of it gets paid, and it's very clear.
Mhm.
It's 12 hours of this job is from this, and it's paid out of this fund and in this way, and I think that's what it would have to be. So it keeps it cleaner. Yes, there could be someone in the assessor's office, but at the beginning of the year, they'd have to say, 15 hours of this person's time goes towards it basically being hired, and 25 hours goes towards this, and that 15 hours then is paid this amount, and we've done that in other ways.
If that's what this is allowing, then that's
I
fine.
believe that's what this is allowing. Counselor,
It
is
has
that
to.
it? Yeah.
That would be silly for it not to. I mean, honestly.
It's you.
Maybe better not to try and wordsmith this, but to get a sense of what it ought to say. Wordsmithing when you don't have it in front of you.
Yeah, I think we just can talk about the spirit of what it, I mean, honestly, without the actual words, we're just limited. So the question to me is, are we in favor of essentially earmarking these funds? That's what it sounds like. We're earmarking the fees to this purpose only.
And permitting indirect costs associated.
And, right.
Which is, I guess all I mean is that there will obviously be some general fund relief provided, because the people who are doing stormwater control now will be hired by the utility. That will happen. So if this is an attempt to, if such an amendment makes that not possible, then we're tying our hand for a symbolic gesture, which I am not in favor of. But if all it does is clarify state law and basically kind of put in place what we're going probably to do anyway, then I'm okay with it.
To me, it seems that this is, my understanding, my assumption is that this is 100% political value, and I say that without disdain. I say that as a messaging fact. It is a message that needs to be stressed, that's not making any substantive change to what is already in process. That's the spirit with which I support this amendment, that it's really communicating very deliberately, very explicitly what is implicit. And so,
Yeah, I think that it may be, I'm not sure, but it may be that, for example, Ned Huntley is the director. If this utility goes in place, he's not gonna be working directly on this utility, but I would imagine 2 or 3% of his time, you know, a little bit more,
That's how
is
they
gonna be
select
working with it, talking, being the manager of who's ever managing it, making, but we're not giving Ned any additional funds to
Right.
do that.
Right.
That's what it's saying. We're not, he's gonna do that, there are gonna be other people in the city who do that, but we're saying that's just part of your city
Be part of your
job.
job description.
But we're not gonna add, again, the concern was, and you may be right, the smithing has to be clearer. We're not using this utility to put any more money into the general fund. And that would even include giving Ned Huntley, paying, you know, if we're gonna give him 2 or 3% of his salary on that, that's where he's worth 5%, then it needs to be clarified and put in there. 5% of his salary comes from the utility, because that's the time he's putting in there.
And I would really encourage that we stay far away from that level of conversation, and that's where I would join Councilor Freeman Daniels. It's like, we should not get into
Yeah,
micromanaging
no,
beyond
I
the
agree.
principle of this money is earmarked to support this effort. It really, otherwise we are diminishing ourselves in the role of government. It just is not right.
The counselor's statement that this is already enshrined in state law, do you agree with that? And-
Yeah, they're lists to what you can use, you know, the funds for.
So might there be a way, without going into the details and the words right now, of saying that, still using this, and again, this is for the public piece, the public education about this. And we could just say, but we have said, I have said at these meetings, well, the money can't be, the reason we bring these things up is because people stand up and say, you know, they want to know, is this going to be used this way? And we say, well, it's enshrined in state law. And somebody says, well, so is the state lottery, one guy said to me, that we're supposed to get X amount of dollars. It's a different situation, but he said he doesn't quite trust it because we're not getting the dollars we're supposed to get from the state. So it's this way of trying to make whatever the statement is, address those concerns about using this in the general fund. And however that can be said, if we agree to that, however that can be said, we're sure that.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I'll say, like, well, I'll repeat, I won't repeat, but I'll say that there will be, I believe there should be and there will be general fund relief with the institution of this utility, because the city is going to be doing some of the stuff that it already had been doing, but without using general fund money for it. And it's going to reallocate people, actual people who work for the city now, toward that, who will not be getting money from the general fund anymore. They'll be getting money from the utility collection. So there will be relief for the general fund. I don't know why that is a bad thing. I disagree that it is a bad thing. So if this is attempting to queer that intended consequence, I'm not sure I'm in favor. If it's clarifying that if someone's going to be devoting work to it, you have to pay them out of that fund or something like that, or it's clarifying who the indirect people, what the indirect costs and the direct costs are, and it has to be accounted for, and we would ask for an accounting at the end of the year, or the board would, that is fine with me.
I agree.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
The public, I think, generally doesn't want this to be something that supports the general fund. That's why we're going. That's why we're going to this extent to try to clarify through these definitions that it won't be. The public wants to. The public has asked, and I think will continue to ask, how do we prevent this from becoming like the water and sewer fees, which go up substantially year after year or have. And one of the ways we do that is by saying, because we're not going to start relying on this. We're not going to start relying for general fund items. We're not going to, general fund items, we're not relying on this. And that's where this comes from. And that's the reason why we're trying to clarify to this extent.
And you're absolutely right. The issue of whether it's, I think it's about $300,000 a year, the city, I think that figure's about right, the city has been using now out of the general fund. That will be removed. And people have raised that. They say, okay, well, if we have the utility, then does that $300,000, which we've, on an average, about been using each year, is that going to be used for other things? Or are we going to keep using that? And the answer is no, we're not going to keep using that. It is relief in the general fund.
It does immediately create some relief in the general fund, but the intention is no more after that point.
I just don't understand, I'm not gonna, the public's not here to argue with.
Yeah.
So-
It will
The
be.
public is, you
The
know,
public will be here to argue with.
Right, so, but I don't believe that it's a bad thing if people that are working on stormwater now were employed by the general fund become employed by the utility, and the general fund does not have to pay for them anymore. I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't either.
So as long as as long as that's permissible, and I know it's permissible by the state, so as long as the city doesn't say that's impermissible, and even if it's someone who comes in on a part-time basis to do compliance with credits or assessment, or GIS, analysis of the, as long as we can pay for that out of the utility.
We can, that's expressive.
Yeah.
That's expressive.
I have one other comment, which is that I do feel like when we talk about the public wants, the public demands, you've heard the various hearings, it's come up by a few people.
It's some people, but if
Some
we can
people.
address
It's
it,
fine,
That's
I'm
all.
not against addressing it, but I guess I just want to make clear that what underlies this is a cynicism and a distrust that's to be validated because it's their feeling. It is not necessarily to be driving our actions.
absolutely not.
And I do believe that, we do ourselves, there's a lot of people not showing up who are saying, we trust city government, we trust you guys to do your job, continue to do the smart job that you're doing with the limited revenue that you have, and, thank you for doing it. So I guess I just want to make sure that we don't, while we are addressing the concerns that are raised, we do it without any sense of apology or any sense of that this is necessary. It's more like, we can offer this to you.
What we need to do, because having been with this for 7 years, we need to educate, and if we can educate, I totally agree, if this is going to somehow tie our hands in some way, we don't want it in there. But if it can address right here on paper what we hear over and over in these meetings, I'm not going to, apologize for the city, but if we can have it written in such a way that Councilor Adams, I think, is trying to do, to say, wait, okay, we actually have looked at that. One of the good things is when somebody stands up and is critical and angry, we can say, that's a great question, and we've looked at that. Let's turn to this section here that we wrote. Here's the reason. There's something very powerful in that, and that's all we're trying to do.
Yes, so let's just do it very carefully.
Okay.
Yeah, I also, I won't repeat anything, I agree that anything that helps with transparency is going to be good. I mean, that the cynicism comes from, well, let's face it, this country was founded on people who were very cynical of their government, and they decided they wanted to form their own, and they wrote the Constitution and many of the state laws.
I thought you were going to say this country was founded on cynicism.
Well, I was about to, but
Actually, he was.
and actually, that's not far off from my truth. But what I mean is that that we started this country because of cynical views toward the crown.
Yep.
And we wrote our constitutions largely because the government, we like to have a check on the government. And this is one of them that could be the case, but it has to be, I don't believe that the argument that general fund relief is somehow a bad upshot to instituting utility is
Okay.
I just don't believe that.
Okay. Can we move to the next amendment you have?
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay? Can we move on?
286-6 rates.
Yep.
Section A, second sentence, where it states that it is the intent of the city council to set the annual budget and the amount will be sufficient to say that, that will be sufficient provided for balanced operating capital improvement budget for the stormwater and flood control services. I changed that to the city council will set the annual budget, and that's just
Okay.
clarifying.
Everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the ordinance itself, there's no point saying what.
What
we intend.
Yeah. Okay, we intend to write an ordinance.
Right.
Okay, next.
Oh, actually, well, if I could go back for a minute.
Sure. How do you break your intent? Right.
280-9B2, which was discussed earlier.
80-9.
289.
288-9.
Dash nine.
That was the,
B2.
Oh,
Under
okay,
the
yeah, this
number
is
two.
APR,
The-
APR,
Yes.
SCR.
one of my amendments is to strike that entirely. And the reason why is because I don't think it's fair. And when I say I don't think it's fair, it's because I've been following this process closely. One of the basic premises that we heard over and over and over was that everyone benefits from stormwater and flood control. I know Councilor Ferrandino said that he believes that agricultural preservation restriction land as well as CR land does benefit from it. I think that there should be no exemption entirely for them. All properties pay. That was the basic premise of this. We heard it over and over and over, including nonprofits, the federal and state properties, and even the city. And in fact, that's one of the arguments that it's a fee, not a tax, is that all properties pay. So I don't believe that exempting the agricultural or conservation land makes sense. And on top of that, they're only paying $100 maximum per property, so I don't think it's a substantial.
So are you
distance.
suggesting, like Councilor Daniels, that we move that into the credit section, or just not at all?
I think we should strike it entirely.
Well,
And they may be, my other point, on top of that, it's a $100 maximum, and depending on the credit program that the DPW creates, they might be eligible for deductions based on that anyhow. So they can get credits, and it's about $17,000 from the entire budget. So, and I present,
What's 17,000 from the entire budget?
all those exemptions are about $17,000 total. If all that land was taken out of the $2 million yearly budget, it would total about $17,000. And I presented this amendment to the Board of Public Works City Council Conference Committee meeting last time we met, and actually there were no objections. I believe Jim Dostal was in favor of it from the Stormwater Task Force. So I don't think it's fair that there should be an exemption. Other groups of properties can make arguments that they should be exempt as well. The basic premise is that everyone benefits from stormwater and flood control, and therefore everyone should pay.
so, but it could be, just to follow up, it could be that the board decides that land that has a conservation restriction on it should get a credit, should get a $90 credit or something, should get a credit that's 10% of the price or whatever. But that would be a policy that the board institutes. It wouldn't be a law first. It would be in this law. So you could still end up with the creating, with not removing. Yeah.
Okay. What I'd like to do is, I'm glad you weighed in on it, but we already had that discussion, and I'm glad you added to that, but I'm not sure we need to go back again
There may be
to
no
the
need.
same discussion.
I just
that we
want
had.
this committee to know that I'm moving to actually delete
Gotcha.
this entirely.
Okay. Is
But
that
it
fair
could
enough, unless
still
someone
be
has something new to add?
No, it's just the same thing. The board could put it in.
Right.
You're envisioning that could happen as a credit, just not an exemption.
Right, okay.
And my final one is on rates.
So that's
Back
the
to 280-6. And it's well, what I did is I created a sort of cap. So I'll read A and B as I've redrafted it. So the way I've redrafted 280-6A reads, the annual budget for stormwater management and flood control services shall be based upon the recommendations of the Board of Public Works and shall be approved by a majority vote of the City Council. The City Council will set the annual budget at an amount that will be sufficient to provide for a balanced operating and capital improvement budget for the stormwater management and flood control services. B, for the first 5 fiscal years of the utility operation, the revenue raised by the utility shall not exceed $2 million per year. Beginning in the 6th year, the revenue shall be adjusted based on the recommendation of the Board of Public Works, subject to the approval of the City Council as described above. The annual budget will not be raised by more than 3% of the budget of the prior fiscal year without at least 6 votes of the City Council. So what I'm attempting to do here is, again, there's this concern raised by the public that one of the concerns that is, one of the questions is, how do we keep this thing from being like the water and sewer fees, which went up year after year exponentially for a period of time. And so, what I'm trying to do is balance two things in this, is out of the 7 communities that have adopted this type of utility fee in the state, I think something like 3 have already come back and stated that they don't have enough money to do the things they need to do.
Yep.
So that on one side, we need to ensure that we can have the money to do the things that we need to do. On the other side, I think after 5 years, there should be a cap so that people don't have to worry that it'll go up by itself year after year, substantially. One of the differences is that, well, for one, the Board of Public Works sets the water and sewer rates unilaterally without council approval, and this at least does have to have council approval. But what I've done, what I'm suggesting we do here is the budget starts at $2 million. We have to allow that budget to grow yearly to keep up with real dollars to the extent possible. I picked 3%. We know 2.5 doesn't work very well by our experiences. We probably should 2.5. But then again, it's arguable that 3% is capricious too. And I know we've discussed maybe attaching it to inflation.
But just the general question, we've talked about, this was actually talked about in the Stormwater Task Force, good deal, about should there be a cap on this fee or not? What kind of cap? And they kind of punted it and said, well, you know what? And I think they were right. They said this is in some ways a political question. It should go to the DPW. It should go to, we're setting, the city council is the ones who are going to set the budget. In our last conference committee meeting, you raised the cap idea. It had a good deal of support. How exactly it's done, like you and I differ a little bit because I have some problems with setting an exact figure of 3%. We could hit a period of inflation again 10 years from now where inflation is going up 7% a year for 3 years, and it's like, whoa, now we're in trouble. So I have never liked Proposition 2.5 for that reason. It said some, I don't know how they got 2.5. I mean, why wasn't it 1.2 or 3.6727? So I would like to see it tied into some other economic measure that has some reality to what the economy might be doing at the time. And it might have to be based on the previous 3 years or something like that, because maybe there's, maybe the cost of labor has gone up dramatically, or materials have gone up dramatically. So that's the only difference here, and I'm not thinking we should necessarily hammer that out right now, but we certainly can be open to it, yeah.
So what this basically states is that if you want to exceed that amount, you need 6 votes.
You need 6 votes.
So you need a supermajority. You just need to reach a higher threshold. And I mean, I guess you could even keep it at 3%, and if inflation is 6-7% that year, you can present a budget that has a 6 or 7% growth.
Yeah, it's true.
And
I
that's
mean, we're
the
arguing
reason.
around the edges on this one, but
I'd be wary of assuming that people would treat that any differently than they treat 2.5.
Yeah,
People
I
that act as if
touch on
2.5 is a certainty, and that it's a bad thing and an indication of failure
yeah.
to have to override, which is, 28 of the 32 years since it was passed, it's been greater, inflation's been much greater than 2.5. So it's a silly assumption, but it's what people believe. So if you put a firm number in there, people are going to say, if you ever have to override that, that's a failure.
I totally agree. I've got PTSD on these numbers. I mean, I just think that you can't, I wouldn't go down that road. I completely agree. I just think we have to rely on other versions of, political containment, not that one.
So it's more along the lines of possible.
Well, maybe not even
something
what I'm
around-
saying either, because it's still tied to something. We might have problems that we don't foresee that demand it, and then you say, oh, they failed, they didn't keep within what they
It's what our
said.
elected officials are charged to figure
What
out.
what if we had something like that, it's 6 votes, I mean, we have 6 votes for a number of issues. Maybe it just is 6 votes to approve the budget. So you don't fail to approve any budget at all on this thing.
Well, originally, the way I drafted it was, in order to go up from, originally the way I drafted it was, in order to go up past $2 million a year, you need 6 votes in the city council. So they could raise it any amount, and they would just need 6 votes. But then I was thinking, well, we want the budget we want to allow growth on a yearly basis,
Yeah.
somehow, without 6 votes. And and without having to meet that high threshold. So then I put in 3% for
Yeah.
discussion, so that's why it's in there, and I can eliminate it entirely, but then.
Then we're back, do you
Well,
understand it? Then we're back to this $2 million
Right.
language.
Well,
Which might be restricted.
I don't think, I mean, I don't like the first sentence on B. For the first 5 fiscal years, the revenue raise shall not exceed 2 million. I don't like that. I mean,
I agree.
I'd strike that.
I don't know why we're legislating this.
I'd say the first, if there is a cap, let me put it this way. If there's a cap, I don't have the same, fear about the cap, a cap being in there. Either a soft cap or a flexible cap, variable cap, or a fixed cap. But I think if we're going to put a cap in, we should start from day one. Stay,
Well, we do, $2 million per year.
No, what I mean is $2 million for the first fiscal year. We could put that in the law. But then there's no, it can go up subject to the cap starting in year 2. And again, if it wants to exceed that limit, it's subject to the 6% and so on and so forth, or six supermajority and so on and so forth. But I don't like the idea that for the first 5 years we're stuck in 2 million.
The task force, I think, I find the task force very close. They were very, very serious about having no cap for 5 years, and I would agree with the recommendation because they've considered the issue
But
to
that's
a
no,
great extent.
that's
No,
no growth
he's saying-
for 5 years.
Did the
That's
task
no
force
growth.
actually say, we're not even setting the figure? 2 million the first year, that's all we're recommending, and then after that, maybe it's gonna be 4 million the second year, or 5 million. Are you saying the task force didn't want any cap, but they agreed with the $2 million per year for the first 5 years?
The task force wanted the cap to be 2 million for 5 years and kept it 2 million for 5 years, and then gone entirely.
Right, I think what,
Oh, I see. So basically, a hard cap, a ceiling, and then no ceiling.
Yeah.
And so what we have is a ceiling and then a cap afterwards,
Yeah.
or something like that.
yeah, that was my recollection. And
My
they
compromise would be no ceiling.
none, just,
If you want a cap, no ceiling.
But we do have to keep in mind that this really is a sensitive subject for a lot of people, and they really do want some assurance that there's not going to be growth to the size of water and sewer, that we see in water and sewer. I've heard that over and over and over throughout the course of the public process piece of this, and we'll hear it again. And I really think that in order to make this the best sell possible, because the whole fee is a tough sell.
yeah. And there really was, in this 2 million, I don't disagree with you, that's where I started. There was consensus. I think that the Stormwater Task Force and the DPW finally came to consensus around that $2 million a year for 5 years. They battled this for a long
All right, so
time.
I feel very comfortable deferring to that personally. I mean, in terms of what, personally, in terms of my contribution here today around the topic, I'm done. I mean, I'm done on that. And I personally am opposed to a cap. And unless it's tied to some, again, if you feel like around the messaging piece, there's some way to do it that is tied to something that is secure for the city to do its job governing well.
10%.
I mean, I guess I would not, my instinct is not to meet the public concern that way. It's to validate the concern and respond to it differently without the cap.
May I, I'm going to bring up again, it's not directly related to this, but I don't think we should take a vote today, actually, on recommending or not recommending. I like that we're having just a discussion about this, and we're moving. We can, certainly these are in our minutes. I will certainly bring these concerns back up. I'll say, look, we discussed this again, and we even brought up, there shouldn't be any, even $2 million, that's the first year. But that would be my suggestion, we keep just the dialogue going, but not necessarily.
Will that work with our timeline?
I don't know that we necessarily here, out of this committee, have to have recommendation or not recommendation from an EdLU committee. And as Mary pointed out, we may not even have an EDLU meeting until February. Where do we wait to that meeting to start kind of with new counselors on it? You know,
No,
so
I
I
don't
don't,
think that's productive. Wait, so why wouldn't we take a vote?
well, we could take a vote on what we have here. I'm just saying that,
Because
I'm
we
not
wouldn't
sure
be
it's
voting on your no, it's not even in the
it's
process,
not even in the
right?
process. We certainly
Right, so we'd
could,
be voting on this. Why wouldn't we do that?
we could do that. It's fine to do that. I'm just saying it's an option not to even do that today.
If we're prepared, if we've got some resolution, I think we should communicate it. If
Okay.
we don't, we shouldn't.
Okay.
2 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna withdraw my move to recommend.
And make it, okay, so you don't want to vote on
No, I think we can have another motion, but I'm gonna withdraw my motion to recommend.
So if Pam made a motion to recommend, would you second it?
Well, she has to, no. I would move that we return to the council with no recommendation.
Or we could table it after the discussion. No?
We could, if we wanted to postpone, then we would be saying, Edlu wants to talk about this again. Do we
Yeah.
feel like we want to do that again,
Yeah.
or do we think we can
Yeah.
interact with the other counselors throughout this process?
Yes.
Fine,
So-
fine.
The
So
latter.
let's not, since we do think, at least I believe that there's some changes that should be made here, I'm not willing to vote to recommend. But I don't want to I don't want to recommend again. I don't want to say, recommend, we oppose it. I would just say,
Is it possible?
forward it on to the council, no recommendation.
I don't know if is it possible to recommend with a couple of proposals?
Theoretic change,
I
I
would,
don't think so.
I mean, part of this is, you've got a big document here with lots of things. If we step back, this is a pretty big thing, and we have some fairly minor changes. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's pretty
And
well.
is there a way that we could say that with, saying when we come to the meeting, we have some, there were some concerns raised?
I mean, we've done that before, right?
Yeah,
We've
I
seen-
believe we have.
I feel, yeah, we get recommendations. I think you come forward with a positive recommendation or no recommendation with issues raised,
Yeah.
flagged, or, for further consideration.
Yeah, I would just say, I wouldn't do a positive recommendation, honestly. But I would want to get it off our desks. so
Okay,
we can
we'll get it
so
off our
that
desks.
Ordinance can proceed with it and so on and so forth.
I have the sense that whether we recommend it positively or not is not going to be a big
It's just, yeah.
issue, so.
So he withdrew his motion to recommend, do you withdraw your second?
I guess so. Yes.
So I move that the EDLU committee returns this to the council with no recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Council. Okay, any new business?
I just would like to bring up, hoping that we're going to meet again with the ad hoc.
I spoke to the mayor and I'm hoping that we do that. Even if it means that we have to set up another time, I would like to at least meet with them with this committee.
Yeah, that would be very valuable.
Okay.
Which ad hoc are you talking about?
The ad hoc on the
Roundhouse?
RFP roundhouse.
You weren't here, but I think the public does expect another forum. But again, with
So
acknowledging.
you will be part of the public.
Pace the difficulties of Pache, the difficulties of
Okay.
referring to that in such a way. I think that,
Was there a good turnout?
yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.